This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing tonight? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini, your host, and my engineer Rob Barretts is over there. How you doing, Rob? Hello, Rob. On the other side of the glass. And the latest crop of PPBC success stories are standing by. Successful because they did it. Not because they made $1 million, just because they got the job done. They wrote the book. They stopped thinking about it and just started writing about it, whatever it might be. And in the case of Daniel Harris, once he started, he couldn't stop. He's here to talk about his second book through the Page Publishing Book Club, available online and in bookstores. And I got to hand it to you, Daniel. You have an excellent subject. His new book is a sequel to his first book entitled Blood Feud. This one is called Checked Out. And we're talking supermarket wars, right? Checked out?
Yeah. Well, if you get that, then I know we're on the same vibe.
Yeah. So Blood Feud did well.
It really did well, surprisingly, but I think it was more luck than anything. What happened was it was the story of, in the mid-'90s, of a supermarket chain here in Massachusetts where the two families got in a fight for majority ownership. And it turned out very nasty. In fact, Boston Magazine, I think, called it the costliest and nastiest court case in state history. But that was mid-'90s. But then this book came out, and in 2014, the same operation, Food Basket, the Mullers folks, all of the, when I say all, I mean all of the employees, 25,000 of them, and 3 million consumers went on strike in their 71 stores because their beloved CEO had been replaced, had been fired, actually. And my book came out about the DeMullers and about the supermarket chain just when all this was happening. So, I mean, really, it did well, but I got to say, it wasn't on its own virtue entirely. We had some wonderful timing.
So now you follow this up with Checked Out, and it's Russell Riley, former president of this Galetti Supermarkets, is back.
He's back, and in the end of Blood Feud, he got fired by the CEO because he did a good job of holding off the people that wanted to take it over while the families were fighting, and the volume was all fine, but the CEO thought that his profit line wasn't that great. And then 2 weeks later, when the decision came in on the court case, the CEO got fired. So a lot of people got fired, and he went into the food brokerage business with a pal. And so he was working on the other side. You know, he was selling to supermarkets from a food brokerage standpoint. And then this opportunity for Checked Out came up when the CEO of this chain was murdered in his home in Providence, Rhode Island. The guy that knew Russ Riley called him and said, you know, I know you've done this before. You need to come down and save my supermarket.
You know, you make this sound like it actually happened. Did you base this on what you read in the newspaper, or do you have a connection to this supermarket?
Believe it or not, I was probably a 25-year-old retail sales rep for Procter & Gamble calling on the DeMullers stores, and I knew the two original, actually they were the sons of the owner. They were kind of icons of the industry, but, you know, every once in a while they'd stop by and say hello to their retail guys, so I actually knew the people that were in this food fight of the mid-'90s, this court case, and I had actually called on the stores, and Russell Riley is kind of a drawing off of a guy in the actual DeMullers chain who was, in fact, the highest-ranking non-family member of the organization.
Wow.
So, yeah, I had a pretty intimate knowledge of when I wrote Blood Feud, and then I researched the court case pretty thoroughly, and it was so much fun, Alice. I mean, the judge was Maria Lopez. She had a show on television for a while, Judge Maria, and she was a wonderful character. She did a fabulous job, by the way, in the court case. And two cousins with the exact same name, Arthur DeMullers, got in a fist fight in the courtroom on the first day of court, and two lawyers, when it was all over, were disbarred from practicing law. So the court case was really a dandy, and that one, Alice, so I knew kind of the facts from being a consumer and reading the paper, but I really had to research that one through the Boston Globe and Boston Magazine to find out what the fine points were.
An energetic, high-stakes yarn of greed and betrayal.
I think what was fun about it, too, about Blood Feud was you and I are in the supermarket probably at least once a week.
Right.
What we don't know about how that industry works is kind of a shame because it's such a fun industry. They're kind of wackadoodles. I mean, their idea of a good time is they'll sell an item below cost, and you'll say, geez, George, you're going to lose a lot of money on that. And he says, yeah, but I'll make it up in volume. And you go, what? You're going to sell more of them at a loss, and you're going to make it up in volume? I don't think so. They have a wonderful attitude. And the other thing that sticks out about the industry is there's just gobs of money around, mountains of money. And when you're got mountains of cash around, sometimes bad things happen.
Yeah, bad things happen when you have too much money. Am I right, Rob? Whew. Good thing we don't know anything about that. Yeah. You know what? This book is everything you ever wanted to know about the supermarket industry, but never even thought to ask. Thanks a lot, Daniel. Letter writing inspired Jane Hinchin. 10 years worth of letter writing between her parents sparked the idea for her book entitled The Golden Watch. Jane.
It isn't actually about their life, of course. It's fiction. But it was a good start. It started me thinking about what a great book it would be. And it's intertwined with history. Pre-World War II and during World War II. First, they dated, and then he moved to his uncle's, and they began writing to one another. And, because the characters are so complex, there are a lot of issues involved, such as her mother not wanting her to date him. So when he would come into town, the mother would say, well, she's not home or whatever, and not tell the daughter that he was there. So it went on for about 5 years that they wrote to one another first, and then they ran away and got married.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, they were married 2 years and had their little son, and the war broke out. And then all the men wanted to leave. So her brother went into the Marines, and actually he wanted then to go into the military too, even though he was married and had a son.
Okay.
So then he wasn't accepted. And he was like pouting and thinking everybody thinks he's, not doing the right thing, because that's what the attitude was. So eventually he goes into the Merchant Marines, and they're writing letters back and forth, and their life goes on from there. And it's just so complex, so interesting, so romantic at times and unromantic at other times.
Yeah. So you really wanted to delve into the relationship between your parents. Did you find out a lot of things you didn't know?
Just reading the letters when I was actually writing the book and reading the letters over and over, it just brought my father to light in my mind. So it was a great experience. And I think a book that anyone that picked it up would have a hard time putting it down. When I first started writing, which was about 2 years ago, I had a lot of encouragement. And this was my third book. The second book was actually based on my grandmother's life. And when I finished it, I thought, I want to continue it on with the interaction between my grandmother and my mother. And so that's how it came about.
Did you publish your second book with Paige as well?
Yes, all 3 books. I've got a 4th one being published right now, and I'm working on a 5th book. I've gone into romance novels. People are really enjoying them. Some people just love them. Other people are a little surprised that I'm the person writing them, and a lot of different reactions.
Why are they surprised?
Well, because I'm retired, and I operated and owned my own insurance agency for 32 years.
Oh.
And then to retire and start writing novels seemed like a surprise to them.
Well, you know what? No one should be surprised, Jane. You go, girl. Good for you. They're probably wondering, how does she do that? They probably expected you to retire. But who wants to retire, man? You got to keep going. Good for you. Doug Alley has been living with the subject of his book for, a couple of decades. It's called My Wife Says. So I'm going to take a stab here, Doug. It's about your wife?
Yeah, my wife, my daughter, both the kids. My in-laws are in there a little bit, but it's primarily about my wife, and yes, she was on board with it. So,
Is this a book of honeydews?
No, actually, it's more of a book of blips and blurbs and short stories. See, my wife has her own language that I most often don't understand. So I say all the time, and it sounds like a joke, but I'm really serious. The three most common things you'll ever hear me say in my house are yes, dear, no, dear, and what the hell are you talking about?
Well, what's so confusing about, does she speak another language?
No, it's just the context. If you read the book, it makes sense, but it's the context of what she says. For instance, she'll take some of the old sayings and just kind of jumble them up and make them into something else, like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. The way she says it is 6 and a half dozen of another loaf of bread. There you go. Now you get it. Now you know what I mean. But it's comical.
Well, you call it a book of Careyisms and other tidbits, too.
So that was a Careyism. And the other tidbits are, things from the kids, the in-laws, and myself. The last chapter is about me. And I say that we all have a dim spot in our minds that kick in once in a while. And that last chapter is about a time when my dim spot kicked in. And it's probably no different for anyone else. But I just think it's hilarious when it's the girls, because my daughter kind of is a chip off the old block, and she develops that same kind of speech pattern that her mother has, and the two of them can understand each other, but I'm lost.
So you think that people will enjoy the Careyisms and the funny language that your family has kind of developed?
Well, I'm hoping. I know I enjoy it, and I think it's funny, and I just thought other people might like it too. And here's how it came about. Several years ago, we were standing in the kitchen. It's just me and my wife, Carrie, and I don't know what we were talking about. She came out with one of those strange, off-the-wall kind of remarks that I couldn't tell you even what it was now. And I looked at her then, and I said, "Where do you get this stuff from?" And she said, "I don't know. It just comes out." And I said, I could write a book. And I said it in jest, and I walked away. And as I started thinking about it, a little while later, I came back into the kitchen, and I said, "Hey, remember that remark that I made?" And so I bounced it off of her, and we started talking, and she said, "Yeah, why not?" So she and my daughter and I, over the course of the next couple of weekends, sat down at the kitchen table, and we just started brainstorming and trying to remember as many of these things that she had said as we could, as many of these off-the-wall remarks. And, one of us remembered a little, and the other one remembered a little, and we were able to bounce off of each other like that and put the stories together, and it was funny. So we just worked for a couple of weekends until we just couldn't remember anymore. And for about the next 5 years, all we did was take notes. I carry a pocket recorder with me at work, and I would dictate stuff into there. If we were in the car, my wife or my daughter, if she was with us in the back seat, they'd take notes. And I put it all into a composition book for about 5 years until I had enough to start pointing down on some pages.
Nice. So really, the book turned into a little family project. Well, not a little family, a big family project. And Doug, hoping someday, maybe a sitcom. We are going to take a quick break. Coming up, a doctor of radiology who has dealt with thousands of breast cancer patients, and he just couldn't stay quiet any longer about the way we treat breast cancer in America, and a Basque immigrant's adventure in America. Grab some popcorn and come on back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Hey, look, Rob, they came back. Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. You'll be so glad you did. Dr. Parvis Gamagami is a doctor of radiology. He has worked with breast cancer patients for over 50 years. In his book entitled Fight New Ways, Breast Cancer, he provides information he says cannot be found anywhere else. Welcome, Dr. Gamagami. Tell me exactly what is it that is in your book that cannot be found anywhere else?
First of all, at the present time, the treatment of the breast cancer is standard. And this is standard, let's say, for the conservative breast cancer. Conservative breast cancer, when they found the cancer, patient goes, if it is more than 1 centimeter, goes for radiation therapy. And if lymph node is positive, then they do for the chemotherapy. But the discovery of genetics in the last 10 years, it shows that this standard is not valuable or not valid for every patient. So that's why the patient should have a genetic test of her tumor. Then this shows whether the patient needs radiation therapy, whether the patient needs chemotherapy or not. Unfortunately, at this time, the standard of treatment is the one size fits all.
Right.
That's why it had skyrocketed the cost of the breast cancer treatment. So this, I emphasize, especially that the patient first about the radiology, how the lesions should be come out, and then there are the techniques that I have initiated first, and then the removal of this lesion completely, so that prevent recurrence. At this time, 50% of the patient, there is a 50% of reintervention because the lesion has not been taken out with clear margin or correctly completely. This technique that I initiated prevented this recurrence enormously. So that's one thing. The second thing that I said that each patient should have MRI after the removal of the lesion at the first step. Then if there is anything, so the patient does not need any radiation therapy. And I have shown of 4,000 patients that I have seen the result of if you look at the book, if you have the book, you see the deformity of the breast at 25 years after that.
Right.
And the radiation is not only deformed that, there is also the other side effect, the heart and then fibrosis. And the worst thing is that when you do radiation, most of the breast tissue is killed. And then make a scar tissue. And this scar tissue for 25 years for patient sometimes is painful, and not sometimes. 30% of cancer recurrence, we cannot find it because of the fibrosis of the breast tissue. That's why I said that radiation therapy is not necessary for the patient with a small cancer. So these are all the new things.
So what you're saying is you have a different perspective on breast cancer, and in your book, you will find things that you will find nowhere else. So
exactly.
if you are dealing with a relative or a loved one or a friend, or if you're dealing with breast cancer yourself, people should check out your book to look for alternatives. And,
exactly.
And I think that is crucial, and I've heard other people talk about that. I know people in research who are saying that, you don't always need chemotherapy, you don't always need radiation, and that we do this one size fits all. And, we aren't one size fits all. You can't just go by what your doctor tells you. You
exactly.
got to do your own research. So thank you. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Next, a college professor for 20 years, Frank Luna was raised a leftist and slowly evolved politically while coming to the realization there was bias in the classroom. And that's what his book entitled Shattering the Icons is all about. Frank, you say you read a book in college that made a huge impact on you.
The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. and it set me on a completely different path. And utilizing that source and the other ones that I have in the book, it showed me a completely different picture of these so-called progressive countries that are, in fact, not helping the worker, but are, in fact, oppressing them even further. And so that's what set me on a new path. And if you read the book, you'll see I lay out in very good detail the atrocities committed by these Marxist leaders in places such as, of course, the Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, and also Cuba, which was, of course, my idol and my dream state as I was growing up. So the bottom line, when I was done with my research, I realized that the tally from communist countries, from Marxist countries, was over 100 million dead. And I was told nothing about this by my professors, right? It was a completely biased classroom and environment. And it's not only at Fresno State, I discovered. In doing more research, I realized that this is pervasive throughout the United States, that most of the professors, even though Marxism in many parts of the world has now been discredited, most of the professors come from the left. And certainly what is lacking in the American public university system and colleges is some sort of balance, right? Some sort of balance between the left and the right. And that's when I decided to go into the teaching profession, because I saw what was happening in the classroom was not diversity, was not education, but in fact was the opposite. And in the book, if you read the second section, in detail, it shows how I try to provide balance on both sides. So I cover elements like the very controversial atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II, and I try to document both sides. I also include veterans in the Vietnam War, how the American GI was treated not only back here at home, but of course how it was portrayed in the media. I try to give a balanced approach in my classroom. It is geared toward the academic community, but I wrote it for the general reader as well, right? At the latter half of the book, I include stories about in the trenches trying to help students, some of them, of course, very heroic, some of them kind of quirky, some of them that impede the academic process in the classroom, things such as texting, modern technology. It also includes trying to stand back and seeing both sides of the argument, and that's how I think real diversity occurs in the classroom, right? A healthy debate and not being stifled because of your point of view. I think that's going to provide for a better academic environment throughout, not only at Fresno State, but throughout, of course, the entire academic community in the U.S.
All right, Frank, could not agree with you more. Keep that discussion going. Finally, Richard Orizzaga, the name is Basque, and his book is entitled The Outlaw and the Pocket Watch, a story of a Basque immigrant's adventures in America. Richard, would this be your adventure?
I used my grandparents' story to come into the United States.
Did they really escape the tyranny of the Spanish government?
Yeah, that's true. And the book is fiction, but the story of their coming to the United States and taking on a sheep herding contract and then taking over, the ranch and everything, they did that. He did that. My grandfather did all that.
How did he know how to do sheep herding?
This is crazy that they automatically think you are a Basque origin. People automatically assume that you already know how to herd sheep. That is not true.
So he meets up with an outlaw from Missouri.
Yeah, this Missouri outlaw fought in the Civil War, and then the Ghost Riders and stuff like that. These were Confederate soldiers that refused to turn in their arms and stuff like that.
Right.
Anyway, what happens is they're tracking them down. They're hunting these outlaws down, and he's drunk and passed out in a Liberty stable. Some thief sees he's an easy mark, takes his coat and hat and horse and stuff and rides out. Well, then these guys that are closing the net on him, they shoot this guy thinking that he's the Confederate soldier. And then the kid finally sobers up, and he realizes that he's got a chance at a new life now. And so he heads west. 30 years later, here's a kid who's sitting in his bar wounded. The old man takes the kid's place. The kid stops a rape, and then so now this cattle rancher is after him because he killed one of his sons and maimed another one. Then he gets shot, and he's made it back. The book starts out in the bar. The kid is wounded. He's made it into town, and he's sitting at the bar, and that's when the old man sees what's going on. Well, he's trying to talk to him and stuff. The kid's incoherent, you know. At the end of chapter 1, he pulls his watch out because he knows he can't. He's got to get going. That's why they outlaw the pocket watch. Because all through it, they refer to this watch. Okay, this is what happens. The end of chapter 1, the kid pulls his watch out to see because he knows he's got to get going. And he sees the inscription written in the Basque language, you know, to my loving son. His dad gave him the watch. He starts reminiscing, going back, what the hell did I get myself into?
Okay.
And by the end of chapter 8, you're back at the bar. See, he goes through the whole story of how he got in trouble. And you know what happens is the old man hides the kid and then takes these guys on a wild goose chase.
It's an interesting way to set up your story, I think. A creative way to set up your story. Is it one and done, or is there a sequel after this book?
No, there's no sequel. I have 2 other books that are almost ready for submission, but no sequel on this one, no.
All right, Richard, A Story of Immigrants, always worth sharing. If for nothing else, to remind all Americans that we are a nation of immigrants. Most of us all came from somewhere other than America. So, you know, I'm just saying. Something to think about in this crazy election season. And here's something else to think about, Rob. If you miss a show, all you have to do is go to 710WOR.iHeart.com, click on air, click on more, click on Sunday, and there we are. Very first show on the list. Click on the Page Publishing Book Club, and you can download us and listen to our episodes when you want, as many times as you want. Huh? How much fun would that be, Rob? Oh, yeah. And you can listen to our station anytime you want on the iHeartRadio app. Just click on 710 WOR. I myself am partial to mornings. If you haven't heard Len and Todd in the morning, you're missing the morning zoo for adults, I got to tell you. And I'm one of the animals in the pen, so hey, that's worth it right there. Am I right, Rob? Absolutely. Come back next week for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club, unless the Mets knock us out of our time slot because they're going into extra innings and they're winning. Yes, same time, same place, the Page Publishing Book Club right here on 710 WOR.